Hi there, I'm Abigail Beatrice Cormack.
I'm Phineas Caractacus Cromwell.
I'm Lucas Merriweather Buford.
And welcome to episode 2 of Antiford on Air.
So, we think that with the second episode, we've already introduced you to our world, who we are as a group. You should get to know us individually. So, a bit of our backstories. I guess I'll start. I'm Lucas. As a child, I was raised as one of the prince's doubles. I ate with him, I learned what he learned, and I was where he wasn't. Which turned out insanely helpful when the royalties were overthrown by violent technocrats who decided to just off everyone rather than figure out subtly who to kill. So I was very happy not to be in the same place. My arm was cut off in the struggles, but I got away. I crawled all the way to a little desert town, and I've been there ever since, making house calls here and there, repairing steam bikes. I got into the doll business and started doing a bit more with that, talking dolls, moving dolls, and it kind of turned into a whole automaton thing. And I really pioneered the way for mechanical people, I guess. Interesting, strange, but it's what I do.
I'll go next. I'm Phineas. And when I was younger, I was a child prodigy, sciences, engineering, and I was discovered by the Royal Academies. After leaving the academy, after graduating, I started working for the royalty, and I started making all manner of things. One thing that I was making was a way to clear mountains and do mining. I invented an explosive to help with this. And I was working in my basement one day and blew up my house and my wife in it. So, after that, the royalty, and specifically the military, wanted the invention to weaponize it. I knew that was a bad thing, so I refused. They responded by killing my family and exiling me to the desert. There, while in exile, I met my dear friend Boric. We made the excruciating trek back to Gearford, where I acquired a broken ship. I engineered it so that it could fly, and started terrorizing the military and nobility. And, yeah, that kind of sums up
I guess that brings us to Abigail.
Yep, I guess it's my turn to share another sad tale, it seems. I was born into a group of tinkers, which are wandering gypsies, for those who don't know. And we are the people who live on the borders of the slums. So we are the people who are not fit for shacks, and we travel around and fix things. We tinker. And I had a happy life in the desert. Made many friends with demons, who are kind of controversial, but I think they are a well-meaning race. And one day I stumbled upon a cave and found a creature who was dying. And out of the goodness of my heart, I decided to take care of such a creature. And she became a very dear friend of mine. And she taught me all about the desert and all about her world, where she came from. As she seemed to come from a place called Well Island, and she wasn't from our world. As such, she was dying because she couldn't survive in our world for very long, being from Well Island. So she taught me all these things, and unfortunately she was killed in an accident, and unfortunately my fiancé died soon after, being run over by a carriage from the royalty. And this was way, way before the technocrats had taken over, as I'm far older than the rest of my group. I'm not going to tell you my exact age. You should never ask a woman her age. So I had moved to Gearford to complete my vow to kill the aristocrats and the royalty, and I was quite surprised when the technocrats came over and killed before me, which was quite useful. But it turned out that the technocrats were no better. So I vowed to kill them too, by using the things that my dear friend, the Bear Witch, had taught me. All about the poisons of the desert and all the concoctions of the mind. And I have my little shop where you can find all sorts of good trinkets and antiques and books and some scratches for your itches. if you know what I mean. So, now that you know us, we're going to talk about stuff that inspires us.
Some steampunk in media, TV, books, etc., etc. So I guess the first thing that's all abuzz that we've been excited about is Warehouse 13.
Woohoo! Warehouse 13 is a great series that kind of blends a lot of different technologies and artifacts, and it's a lot of fun. And while it's not strictly steampunk, it has a lot of steampunk aspects. One of their primary devices is a lightning gun that Nikola Tesla invented. Other things like Sylvia Plath's typewriter that makes people depressed when they go near it.
There's a whole bunch. Beatrix Potter's tea set. That was a fascinating one. So the objects themselves are alive, which is a very steampunk thing. And it helps to be a history buff, to know what they're talking about. Steampunk, very, very steampunk. The more history buff you get, the more you're going to enjoy yourself. So, yeah, they definitely run amok, and Warehouse 13 has a whole bunch of gizmos and gadgets, and, I don't know, H.G. Wells is a woman agent, invents a rocket to space, which goes awry.
There are a lot of other series out there, and there's also some in film which do cross over with each other, like Wild Wild West was originally a television series, and they made a movie out of it. And technically, it's Weird West, not so much steampunk, but Weird West, they blend together.
Weird West is really turning into the American steampunk.
Yes, it is.
Cowboys with crazy lightning guns and geared machines of doom. So, I mean, there's also a whole bunch of very comic booky stuff. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Van Helsing, Hellboy, lots of steampunk. I mean, and any version of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes himself, just a great character. It's period, so you can do what you like with it. The new Robert Downey Jr. one has some steampunk gizmos.
There's lots of gadgets that aren't necessarily true to the time period, but convincing in the film.
Yes, very convincing. And very cool. I definitely want all those little gadgets and gizmos and guns and spy glasses.
And the use of costumes.
I love costumes.
So on movies, I guess we can get into some anime.
Yeah, there's Steam Boy. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Delves right to the heart of what is steampunk. Because the whole story revolves around a hyper-condensed ball of steam that ends up being used to power a gigantic flying steam-powered castle of doom. Awesome series. So yeah, and there's a whole bunch of Miyazaki stuff that's steampunky.
Definitely. Yeah.
Howl's Moving Castle, the biggest one, mainly because Howl's Moving Castle is a steam-driven castle with all these crazy chutes and gizmos
pipes and everything.
Gears and...
But it extends more than just the castle itself.
Yes,
all
definitely.
of the aircraft, they're like these giant
Warships
that have flapping wings. And you see the inside of them at one point, and you see, like, pipes and pistons, and it's very steampunk.
As for some games coming out of Japan, Final Fantasy IX, definitely one of my favorites. I love the Final Fantasies. And Final Fantasy IX, as a lot of Final Fantasies revolve around, is Mist. Mist is this gross, misty, monster-making grossness, and humans want to stay away from it because it makes monsters. So they had developed these flying airships to ride the mist as it was occurring. But that's not where it stops. There's a lot of other steampunk things in there, as some of the details are very steampunk, like the weaponry, use of guns, and... Not to give anything away, but eventually, at the end of it, there's a lot of science-y creation, manipulation of automatons, and some really good stuff. You should play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also the Penny Arcade guys decided to put their money where their mouth was, make a video game, very Lovecraftian, on the rain-slick precipice of darkness. Great series. They only made 2 episodes. It was planned to be 4. They found out making games is hard. They wrote it down, the rest of the story. So you can't play 3 and 4, but you can read what happened to the characters. So that's good. Speaking of webcomics, there's also Babbage and Loveless. Very fun, adventurous webcomic. So I guess the books. You gotta read. You want to be a steampunk? Please do yourself a favor. Get into reading.
Yes.
That's where a lot of people get the inspiration to do the other media that we've talked about.
And if you don't like reading, get books on tape. That's what I do. I love sitting down and reading a good book, but I'm too ADHD for that. So listen to stuff while you're doing other stuff. It'll keep you entertained.
I've gotten into very popular, very critiqued, but very popular series, the Clockwork Century series, Bone Shaker, steampunk zombie novel, and its sequel, Dreadnought, this insanely crazy, gigantic train that is taking our heroine across the country through alternate history civil war that's been extended 20-something years. People, second generation fighting a war they have no idea why they're still fighting. It's very, very good. I like it. I like the strong female protagonists in it. It's just an all-around good story.
Also, off of books, although as not as steampunky as the previous book, his Dark Materials. Everything, as I think, lies within the details with steampunk. You can go all out with gears and giant jets and whatever, but people don't really walk around with, airships taped to their head. So, as in his Dark Materials, or the first book being The Golden Compass, little trinkets definitely matter. So this little trinket can tell you the truth, which actually, later in the series, progresses and has all these other mystical powers and stuff that leads them to a great big finale, which I can't really get into because it would ruin the entire series, and you have to read it, but definitely otherworldly, very interesting, very complicated and intricate, which is definitely steampunk, and lots of airships and balloons and interesting things like that if you're into the big mechanics as well.
Yeah. Also, none of us have read it, but it's on all of ours and all of almost every steampunk's to-read list, The Difference Engine. Check it out.
We can't really walk away from books without talking about a couple of people that kind of gave the inspiration for a lot of what's for the aesthetic of steampunk.
What we'd call proto-steampunk.
Yeah, and those being the works of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. With H.G. Wells, you have The Time Machine and War of the Worlds, which a lot of steampunk has really come out of that. And with Jules Verne, you have 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, with submarines back in the late 1800s that traverse great distances. Journey to the Moon, which was, it was about literally traveling to the moon. It was unheard of back in that time. Yeah. So they really laid the groundwork for everybody else doing what they're doing now.
Which is great, because we're kind of Victorian-era futurism. So we hope that you find a lot of this helpful. We hope that you find steampunk series media to help you get inspired to write your own stuff.
Even if it doesn't inspire you, it's still fun. Still check it out, because it is just a good time.
So I guess that's the second episode of Antiford on Air.
Thanks for listening to us.